with this other aircraft carrier on the way, I think most people expect that once it arrives, that we'll start seeing strikes relatively shortly after. Is that how you're feeling?
Um, I think there's a very good chance of it. That's all I can say. It's, there's nothing that's certain, especially when it comes to Trump, but there's a very good chance. I've heard everything from 2 weeks to a month. I don't know what it really takes. I'm not a military man here, but I've heard 2 weeks to a month. And I think Trump actually even offered a month. Like, I'll give him about a month if I remember correctly. So that could be what we're looking at. That may be the deadline.
Yeah, I feel like with this Epstein stuff is going to push him over the edge to make this happen. This is something that he can't shake, and it's just been devastating to his administration. And he's being known as the Epstein administration, this cover-up administration, the pedophile administration. It's not a good look. So what can he do? And it's just so clear within these Epstein files. It's amazing how mainstream media try to say that this is somehow, he fled to Israel after his crimes, and he's wearing an IDF shirt, and he's meeting with Ehud Barak, and he's met with, he's call everybody going
like hundreds of times or something.
Yeah, 100 times, right? But clearly that means he's a Russian asset. Somehow that's what they landed on. But it's just so clear that Epstein was heavily involved with Israel. His loyalty was lying with Israel above any other country. And it just seems very clear about that, and all the horrible stuff he's done and all the dirt he has on everybody. And if the rest of these files come out, I think it's over for Israel. It's just going to be undeniable for everybody in the world, like, what has happened here? What is going on? Something very dark and sinister. This country that we were told to basically worship, and many Americans did for so long, is actually, and still do. Yeah, is actually this horrible, evil entity that has corrupted much of the United States and taken over so many of our institutions to use for their own gain, and possibly have this very incriminating, criminal pedophile tapes on our politicians that might just push us into this war. I think that's where we're at. It's just so insane. It's so insane.
Yeah, well, it may be. I know that it was a former head of Israeli military intelligence. It's not Mossad, a different intelligence agency, but said that he believed that the Israelis had leverage on Trump because of Epstein. They had compromising material. And he said that openly in an interview. So, again, it may not be true, but there's certainly reason to suspect that it is true. But right, even all that, even set that aside, it's just like it's clear that there's a lot of levers that they can apply, and he's under a lot of pressure. I keep on seeing these different clips of let's say former administration officials, and pundits and so on, pretty much mocking him, or implying that if he doesn't go ahead, that he's a weakling. And I think those things, all those, these appear on Fox News, which we know that he watches regularly and seems to regard as more important than his intelligence briefings. And I'm sure that those various statements are having an effect on him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Epstein stuff is also just an albatross around his neck, and Israel. So I feel like they just got us, the only way out in their mind might be to have this war. And I think that might be one of the big reasons. And it's just so crazy to think that might be the case.
Yeah, I like on Israel's, okay, well, of course, Netanyahu has his own domestic difficulties. But I think Israel might also be just looking at it more strategically. They know that it could be bad now, that they, if a war is launched now, that they're going to probably going to be hit and hit pretty hard. But they still feel like they have a reasonable chance of coming out on top. At least that may be their assessment. It may be a wrong assessment, but I think maybe that's their assessment. They're, again, overconfident. Just to say we're actually overconfident vis-a-vis Hamas. There was this assumption, partly one of the reasons, and I think it may be true, that their guard was down, is that just they really underestimated Hamas, and it just didn't seem to think that they were capable of launching a complicated operation. There obviously was intelligence that some operation was coming, but they just weren't worried about it. But I think they also underestimate the Iranians, and they think that they can win. But they're looking at it, but they may say, well, it could be bad now. But in a year's time, it'll be too late. It'll be impossible. Not only will by that time the Iranians have formidable air defense, but also their missiles will be that much better. I was actually just last night watching an interview of Ted Postal, the military expert, especially missile and rocket expert. And he's saying, the long range missiles that Iran has now, they're good, but they're not that accurate. They're about accurate within a kilometer. But it won't take that much effort to double their accuracy to, let's say, 500 meters. And when you do that, it becomes possible. And that, with help from the Russians, and he believes that they're receiving that help from the Russians, it may take some time, maybe a year, maybe a couple of years, who knows. But when they achieve those higher accuracies, they can actually just wipe out Tel Aviv with the missiles that they have. They can just wipe out Tel Aviv.
Aren't they pretty accurate already? Because we saw missiles in Tel Aviv, landing in Tel Aviv, and they weren't hitting residential buildings. They were hitting what seemed to be actual,
Yeah, some of them did hit residential buildings. I remember at the end there was, with that, all I can do is go by his analysis, and he does show, a very careful analysis of various Iranian missile strikes. And that's what he says. That's all I can say is to pass that on. Again, I have an impression of greater accuracy like you do, but it's just an impression. And again, he's looked at everything. He says that, they did formidable damage. And one thing is, like, he has relatives and friends in Tel Aviv, and they said, like downtown Tel Aviv was a mess. But you wouldn't know that. Like, again, I read Haaretz, but you almost wouldn't know that it happened. There was a real effort within Israeli media not to talk about it. And by and large, Western media went along with it. So most people don't really understand how much damage was done, but they could do much, much more. That's the point. It's just like just by doubling the accuracy, again, with the missiles they have, they could actually just wipe out. A certain number of missiles actually went into the Mediterranean. We didn't see those. And that wouldn't be happening anymore. They would all be, hitting targets, or they're close enough that they'd always damage the targets, because these are large enough warheads that if it does land within 500 meters, it's actually going to damage the target. And it gets closer, and it most likely will be closer. We're taking like 500. That's the outer range. It's going to destroy or severely damage the target. And then when you have, if you send 500 missiles to Tel Aviv altogether, they just pretty much would wipe out Tel Aviv. That's something that, again, it's a conventional capability. We're not talking about a nuclear weapon, but it's almost the effect of a nuclear weapon. So what I'm saying, again, is that the Israelis understand within a certain period of time, like a year or 2 years or whatever, it's just going to be all over. So they say, well, okay, maybe we could be damaged now, but the Iranians, because we see they're getting this help from the Chinese and the Russians, that's already a problem, but it can become an insurmountable problem, within a year or longer.
Is there any way that Iran, or just the world in general, can protect itself from the threat of the use of a nuclear weapon by Israel? Like, can we do we know where they're located? Can we bomb the silos so they can't launch out or something? This is what's the most terrifying thing.
Right.
For me.
No, it is. It is terrifying. That's something that the Iranians must be considering. They must be wondering, okay, we want to hurt them, but we don't want to hurt them that bad, because it's this is where we are. Again, it's like where you asked at the beginning, are we catastrophizing? I say, no, these are real. This is all very realistic. We know about the Samson Option. We know, what could happen here. And probably it won't get to that. But just the fact that it's possible, should be, again, there's something that has happened to the West over the last, maybe it's just since the unipolar moment, that we've just been, this is insufferable smugness or complacency or something that didn't exist before. When I was young, people were really worried about nuclear war. They really were. It was something that was constantly debated, and people say, well, okay, yeah, we don't like the Soviet Union, but we can't have a nuclear war. We have to make peace with them. We need to negotiate. And we did it. It happened under, both Republican and Democratic administrations. But we live in a different time. Again, we just seem to be sleepwalking into disaster. There should be a lot of talk about this, the huge dangers, but instead we're okay, talking about Pam Bondi. Okay, that's news, but I think this is the bigger news, to be honest.
Yeah, it's all kind of tied in. So I don't care how people get to it, like you said, like if it's via Epstein or via the conflict here in the Middle East with Gaza and Palestine, I mean, in Israel or Iran. But yeah, I'm just wondering, like, what if the Iran struck Dimona, the nuclear facility in Israel? Do you think? I mean, first of all, the United States, we struck Iran's heavily
Right.
surveilled, IAEA inspected nuclear facilities. These had like cameras in basically every single room. We knew what was going on there. There was nothing nefarious, but we do have this secret weapons nuclear plant in Israel, Dimona, that they apparently use to make their nuclear weapons when they're not part of the NPT, not inspected. What if Iran struck that plant? What would
I guess
could the U.S. Go ahead.
I guess there's certainly it seems to me that there's a danger that that one or more nuclear weapons could be detonated as a result, and then the blame would probably be placed on Iran. Unfortunately,
if they're storing them there, I don't know if they store them at that plant.
I don't know. Actually, you're right. I don't know. So I just don't know what. Yeah, where
they're not supposed to have nuclear weapons. How could you blame Iran? It's like you want to. What? Where did that come from?
They will. They'll have a way of blaming Iran. You know that they will.
Yeah, but would you think the world would accept that? I mean,
it's a part of the world might.
I don't know. I just don't understand. I just don't say it's like, hey, yeah, you were never supposed to have allowed to have nuclear weapons to begin with.
Right.
I mean, it is one of the craziest things. I mean, do most people around the world, they understand that Israel has nuclear weapons but they're not supposed to?
It's kind of it's one of the worst kept secrets. It's actually the Israelis want people to know that they have nuclear weapons without ever officially acknowledging them. That's been their policy for a long time. So yeah, every government in the world, and I think most people around the world know that they do have nuclear weapons.
Did you hear about there's some clips, I think it was on Judge Knapp, and I've seen it some other places where they say that the Saudis have nuclear weapons. Do you believe that?
I don't think so. I think I've heard that rumor, but I don't think so. It's always possible. It's what can you say? They have a relationship with the Pakistanis who have them, and maybe I think that's the story is that they worked out a deal with the Pakistanis, and the Pakistanis transferred some nuclear weapons to them. Now, I just heard that that rumor from one source, and it hasn't been confirmed. So I think it's unlikely, but it's not impossible. Of course, it's not impossible.
Yeah, this war is going to go nuclear. I feel like that's the inevitable outcome of this conflict.
Yeah, I'll never say inevitable. I mean, there's even a chance
very
we
likely
might not have the war. I hope so. Yeah. Garland Nixon believes that we won't, and I hope he's right.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hope he's right too. I mean, you never know with Trump. He always has that ability to just turn on a dime. So, but I just feel like they got him cornered with Epstein and everything else.
It's just hard to see how he could do it, in this case. And I don't see how he's going to do it. But he might. He can surprise us. He's surprised. I think this would be the biggest taco. It would be the best one. I would say
the biggest and best.
Yeah, it would definitely be a thumbs up from me, but not likely.